The sky above Targos 4 was red and dusty. The twin suns burned down on the slave market like two cruel eyes. Crowds of aliens and humans filled the area, shouting, pushing, laughing beneath a large metal dome. Girls stood in chains, lined up. On a rusted stage, some cried, some stared at the ground. Others looked empty inside. Sira stood in the middle, her wrists tied, her shoulders shaking. Her once smooth skin was covered in bruises and dirt. Her glowing blue marking symbols of her noble blood were fading. No one cared. To them, she was just another slave. Next, a rare one. The auctioneer shouted. He was a tall, lizard-like alien, wearing gold rings on each clawed finger. Blue-skinned, noble blood, sold as a bed warmer. Start the bid at 100 credits. The crowd laughed. She looks broken. Someone shouted, not worth 50. Said another. Sira closed her eyes, her heart beating like thunder. She had stopped hoping long ago. She didn't cry now, not because she was brave, but because there were no tears left. 70 credits. A voice called. Sira opened her eyes. A fat alien male with yellow teeth raised his hand. Grinning wide, she had seen his kind before. Brutal, cruel owners of many slaves. She took a step back, shaking her head without meaning to, but the guard behind her jabbed her side with a stun rod. She bit her lip to stop herself from screaming. 80. Shouted another bidder. 85. The numbers went up slowly, cruelly, as if every bid was another nail in her coffin. And then, silence. A new voice spoke, calm and deep. 90 credits. The crowd turned. It was a human. Middle-aged, rough beard, wearing a long coat covered in dust. He had a scar across one cheek and tired eyes. But he didn't smile, didn't mock, didn't look hungry like the others. He simply stood there, waiting. A human. The auctioneer laughed. Looking for company. Are we? Number. Answer, going once. Going twice. Sold for 90 credits to the human. Chains clinked as Sira was pushed forward. The guard unlocked her cuffs. Shoving her toward the man, she stumbled and almost fell. But he caught her, gently. Her eyes met his, expecting pain. Expecting cruel words, but he simply said, easy. They walked away from the crowd, through the dust. Sira limped beside him. Her feet sore, her mind spinning. She had been sold many times, but never like this. He didn't drag her, didn't speak harshly. He didn't even touch her again after helping her stand. They reached a small transport ship. Worn down but clean, he opened the ramp, motioned for her to enter. She hesitated. What? What will you do to me? He looked at her, surprised. Feed you, he said. Let you rest. Her legs nearly gave out from shock. No one had ever said that to her. He guided her inside and handed her a bottle of water. She stared at it like it was gold. She drank. Slowly, almost crying when the cool liquid touched her lips. Names read, he said, sitting down across from her. You don't have to tell me yours unless you want to. She blinked, unsure what to say. Sira? She whispered, voice dry and quiet. He nodded, then leaned back in his seat. You'll be safe here. Sira, he said, eyes closing for a moment. You don't belong in chains. She stared at him, not sure whether to believe. Was this another trick? Another game before the real pain came. But he didn't come closer, didn't give her orders. He just sat there, tired, like someone carrying too many memories. Sira wrapped the blanket he had given her around her shoulders. She curled up in a corner of the room, too exhausted to run, too confused to cry. And as the ship lifted into the stars for the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder. Just maybe, was this human? Different? Sarah woke with a sharp breath. Her hands reached out in panic, but there were no chains, no cold collar around her neck. Only a soft blanket over her shoulders and the quiet hum of a ship moving through space. The room was small but clean, gray. Walls, metal floor, a single light blinking softly above her. She sat up slowly, her body still aching from the days before. Her eyes scanned every corner of the room, searching for hidden weapons, cuffs, cameras, but there were none in the AE. Corner, a tray of food sat on a table. Still warm, there was water, real bread, and something that smelled like stew. Sarah stared at it, then at the door, which was slightly open. No guards, no barking orders. She moved carefully, half expecting someone to strike her for taking too long, but no one came. She touched the bread, hesitated, then took a small bite. Her body shook, not from cold, but from something new, confusion. Why was this happening? Why hadn't the human hurt her yet? The door slid open with a soft hiss. Reed stepped in, holding a datapad. He looked tired but calm. She froze, the piece of bread still in her hand. "You're awake," he said, setting the pad down. "I didn't want to wake you. Figured you needed rest." Sarah didn't speak. She just stared at him, her body tense, her muscles ready to run. Reed noticed, but didn't move closer. He nodded toward the food. "You should eat more. You're still weak." She swallowed hard. "Why? Are you doing this?" Reed leaned against the wall, folding his arms. "Because no one else will," he said simply. "No one should be treated like that." Sarah shook her head. "But I'm a bed warmer. That's what I was sold for." Her voice was bitter, full of shame. Reed's face tightened. "No," he said firmly. "That's what they tried to turn you into. But that's not what you are." She didn't know how to reply. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not even before the slavers came. Even in her own home, she was just a daughter meant to bring honor, value, or trade, never worth something on her own. Reed walked over to a shelf and pulled out a small cube. He tapped it, and a soft blue glow filled the air. Holographic stars appeared, maps, worlds, paths through the galaxy. "This is where we're heading," he said, pointing at a small dot, an old mining colony. "Mostly empty now?" He looked at her. "You'll be safe there." "If you want to stay." Sarah stood up slowly, her knees still shaking. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You paid for me. Why?" Reed was silent for a long time. Then he looked down at the floor and said, "My daughter was taken years ago. Same kind of market. Same kind of chains. I couldn't save her in time, but maybe saving someone else can make the silence a little easier to live with." Sarah felt something deep in her chest, like a door creaking open after years of being locked. She looked at him, truly looked this time. His face was lined, his eyes heavy with loss, but there was no cruelty, no hidden hunger, just grief and maybe hope. "Do I have to stay locked in this room?" she asked. Reed chuckled softly. "You're not locked in, Sarah. You can go anywhere on the ship. Just stay away from the engine. Room's a mess." She blinked, surprised. This place was different, and she didn't know what to do with that difference. But she nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said, barely above a whisper. Reed smiled gently. "You don't need to thank me. Just heal." He left the room, the door sliding shut behind him. Not locked, not sealed, just closed. Sarah stood there in silence, unsure of what she was feeling. But it was the first time she felt something other than fear. She turned to the table, picked up the bowl of stew, and sat down. She took another bite, and for the first time in years, she tasted it. Not just as fuel to survive, but as food, warm and real. She looked out the small, round window. Stars passed by in streams of silver and white, and for a moment, she allowed herself to wonder, what if this wasn't a trick? What if she could become more than just what they told her she was? In that cold metal room, wrapped in silence and stars, Sierra whispered to herself, maybe I'm not just broken. The next morning, the silence felt different. Not heavy like before, not like a prison cell. It was the kind of silence that gave space to think, to breathe. Sierra sat at the edge of her bed, her fingers brushing the soft blanket. She still couldn't believe she had slept without chains. A soft knock came at the door, followed by Reed's voice. You can come to the dining bay if you're hungry. He didn't wait for an answer, just left. No orders, no commands, just an offer. Sierra hesitated, then stood slowly. Her legs were still sore, but steadier now. She walked through the hallway carefully, her bare feet pressing against the cool metal floor. The ship felt alive, humming gently beneath her steps. Every corner she passed, she expected a camera, a guard, a hidden trap, but there was nothing. Only quiet lights and open paths. She reached the dining bay, where Reed sat at a table with 2 steaming mugs. He looked up and smiled. Morning. Sierra sat across from him slowly, eyes scanning the room. She stayed silent, unsure what to say. I made tea, Reed said, sliding a mug toward her. She looked at it carefully. It's not drugged. Reed raised an eyebrow, then shook his head with a quiet laugh. No, just herbs and heat. Sierra sipped it slowly, letting the warmth touch her throat. So, Reed said, you can stay here as long as you like. No rush, no pressure. She blinked. And if I try to run? He leaned back in his chair. You won't have to. That confused her. In every place she had been, there were rules. Harsh and cruel. Punishment for speaking, for moving, for breathing too loud. But here, there were no rules at all. Or maybe just different ones. Reed stood and walked over to a small shelf. He pulled out a dusty datapad and handed it to her. This has language tools, basic ship functions, and old galactic maps. You can use it to learn or explore. Sarah stared at it, frozen in the past. She was punished just for touching tech. Now, he was giving her one. Why? She whispered. Reed shrugged. Because knowledge gives power, and you deserve both. She took it with trembling hands when he left the room. She held it tightly in her lap. Her mind said it was a trap, but her heart wasn't sure anymore. Hours passed as she explored the device. She touched the buttons slowly, carefully. Maps opened. Letters danced across the screen. Old memories returned. She had learned things like this once, back before the betrayal. Before she was sold, a noble's daughter, trained to speak 5 languages. Now, she could barely remember her own name without shame clouding it. But the datapad didn't mock her. It waited patiently as she rediscovered herself. One tap at a time. Later that day, she found herself wandering into the ship's side room, a workshop filled with tools, broken parts, glowing panels. She stood at the entrance, not daring to step further. Reed was inside, fixing something under a flickering light. He looked up and smiled. Hey, curious? She nodded slowly. I used to study engine design. Reed stepped aside, waving her in. No harm in getting your hands dirty again. She walked forward, heart pounding. The wires, bolts, and glowing circuits all whispered of a past she thought was dead. She picked up a tool, adjusted a coolant line, and twisted the panel back into place. It fit perfectly. Reed let out a low whistle. Impressive. She looked up, surprised. He didn't sound surprised, like someone mocking. He sounded proud. That night, in her room, Sierra stared at the ceiling. Everything felt strange, almost unreal. No one had hit her. No one had yelled. She had eaten full meals, worked on an engine, used a data pad, and no one tried to take it away. But freedom was terrifying. She didn't know what to do with it. She kept waiting for the slap, the scream, the cage door, but it never came. She whispered to herself, "This can't be real." But a voice inside her answered, "What if it is?" She looked at the datapad again, then at the soft blanket around her shoulders, and finally, at the closed but never locked door. Freedom had rules too, but they were gentler. They were built on trust, not fear, and for the first time, Sarah thought, maybe she could learn how to live with those rules. Maybe she could write her own. The next few days passed quietly on the ship. Sarah woke up at her own pace, ate when she wanted, explored new corners. She had never known this kind of life before, not in the palace where she was born, and certainly not in the cages after. The silence was not empty here. It was peaceful. Reed kept himself busy, working in the engine room or studying maps in the cockpit. He never asked questions, never pushed. He let her breathe. And that made her curious. One afternoon, Sarah wandered into a room she hadn't seen before. The door was open just a little, enough to make her pause. It wasn't locked, so she stepped in, slowly, cautiously. The room was small and quiet. Dim lights glowed on the walls. On one side was a shelf filled with old data chips and holly frames. In the center sat a simple desk with a cracked photo frame resting on it. Sarah walked closer, drawn by something she couldn't explain. She picked up the frame and wiped the dust away. The image was old, but clear. A young girl, maybe 12, smiling with wild brown curls and bright eyes. Reed stood beside her, his arm around her shoulder, both laughing. Sarah stared at the photo for a long time. Behind her, the door opened. Reed stepped in and froze when he saw her holding the picture. "I'm sorry," Sarah said quickly, putting it down. "I didn't mean to snoop." Reed walked forward slowly, his eyes on the frame. "That's my daughter," he said softly. Her name was Ilya. Sarah didn't ask what happened. She could see the answer written in the way his shoulders fell, in the pain behind his voice. "She was taken," he continued. "Just like you, I never found her." A silence filled the room, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy with shared understanding. Sarah looked at the picture again, then whispered, "She looks kind." Reed nodded, his voice tight. "She was? You remind me of her, not just your age, but your strength." Sarah looked away, ashamed. "I'm not strong," she said. "They broke me, over and over." She sat down on the edge of a storage box, her voice shaking. "I was someone once, someone with pride, with value, with dreams, and then I was sold again and again until I stopped remembering who I was." Reed didn't speak right away. He sat down across from her, hands folded. "I don't care what they did to you," he said quietly. "You're still someone now." She laughed bitterly. "Even my own people sold me. I was just a tool, a trade, a debt to clear." Reed leaned forward. "Then forget them," he said. "Let them carry the shame, not you. They broke your body. Yes, but not your spirit. You're still here, still breathing, still fighting." Sarah closed her eyes, tears escaping despite her will. "I don't know how to be anything else," she whispered. "All I've ever been is owned." Reed stood and opened a cabinet behind him. He pulled out a small metal box and handed it to her. Sarah opened it slowly. Inside was a simple silver bracelet. Clean and smooth, no chains, no tracker, just decoration. It belonged to Ilya, Reed said. She used to wear it every day. said it made her feel strong. Sierra looked at him. Wide-eyed. I can't take this. You don't have to keep it, he said. Just wear it for now. Remind yourself you're more than what they tried to make you. She held the bracelet in her hand, staring at its gentle shine. It felt heavy, but not like chains. It felt real and full of meaning that night. She sat in her room with the bracelet on her wrist. She touched it often, as if checking weather. This was still real. A gift, not a collar. She opened her datapad and began typing. At first, just words: her name, her age, her memories, then more places she had seen. Things she had built long ago, as if rewriting herself one line at a time. Sierra knew healing wouldn't come all at once. The pain was deep. And some scars would never fade. But now, she had a place where those scars didn't define her. She looked in the mirror that night, not at her bruises, but at her eyes. They were still tired, still wounded. But they were hers again. And for the first time in a long time, Sierra whispered the words she hadn't dared to say in years. I am still me. The ship drifted quietly through deep space. Stars shimmered outside the window like tiny diamonds. Sierra sat at the dining table, her fingers tracing the edge of her cup. She had started to feel comfortable, almost safe, but something inside her said it wouldn't last. Reed entered the room with a sharp look in his eyes. He held a blinking device in one hand, its screen flashing red. We just picked up a distress signal, he said. Sierra stood up, alert. From where? He showed her the screen, coordinates traced to a backwater Moonzarn 5. Old pirate sector. Sierra frowned. And what kind of distress signal? Reed's voice was tense. It's tagged as Class 7. Child slave alert. The words hit her like a punch to the chest. She didn't ask how he knew it was real. She saw it in his eyes. She remembered the cold floors, the chains, the cries of young voices. She remembered how it felt to wait and wait, hoping someone would come. I want to go with you, she said quickly. Reed shook his head. It's dangerous. I've been through worse. She replied. He hesitated. Sierra, this isn't just about you. There may be guns, traps, hostiles. I know how to talk like them, she said. I know how to blend in, how to lie if I need to. Her voice was firm now, stronger than before. I won't stay behind while someone else suffers what I did. Reed watched her carefully, then gave a slow nod. Suit up. We land in 20 minutes. The surface of Zarn 5 was dark and wet. Heavy mist hung in the air like poison. The outpost stood crooked and rusted metal walls patched with scrap, flickering lights above the doors. 2 guards with blasters stood near the entrance. Laughing and drinking, Reed and Sierra approached slowly. She wore a long cloak, her face hidden, her body tense, but her voice calm. She whispered, "Let me speak first." Reed nodded and stepped back. Sierra walked up to the guards, eyes lowered. Like a servant, I bring a message for Captain Rises, she said. The guard narrowed his eyes. From who? From the one who paid last time, she answered quickly. New payment is waiting. The guards looked at each other, then waved her in. Reed followed closely, pretending to be her handler, inside. The building smelled of oil and smoke. Cages lined the back walls, dark, cold, full of shadows, and in one of them, she saw her. A small alien girl, maybe 7 years old, purple skin, tiny horns, eyes wide with fear. Sierra clenched her fists, anger rising. She kept her voice steady. Will? Need to inspect the goods before payment? One of the guards snorted. No touching until credits show. Reed spoke then, calm and low. Scan us if you like, payments on the ship. But we don't buy without seeing. The leader, Captain Rhea, stepped forward, a heavy-set reptilian man with sharp red eyes. He gave a nod. Fine. 1 minute, the cage door opened with a creak. The little girl flinched, covering her face. Sierra crouched down slowly, whispering in the girl's language. "It's okay. We're here to help." The girl looked at her with trembling lips. "No one helps," she whispered back. Sierra gently touched her shoulder. "I'm someone now. Because someone helped me, you're next." Suddenly, Reza shouted, "That's enough." But it was too late. Sierra had already tapped her wrist device. Outside, Reed's ship lit up, targeting systems active. A loud warning echoed through the outpost. "Warning, unauthorized weapons detected." The guards panicked, blasters raised. Reed moved fast, stunning one guard with a blast to the chest. Sierra grabbed the child and ran behind a table as lasers flew overhead. Smoke filled the room as gas released from Reed's emergency drone. In the chaos, they rushed out, the little girl clinging to Sierra's chest. "Don't let them take me again." The child sobbed. Sierra whispered. "Never." Red covered them. As they boarded the ship, the ramp closed, the engines roared, and they left Sarn 5 behind in fire and smoke. Hours later, the little girl was wrapped in a warm blanket. Asleep in the corner, Sierra sat beside her, brushing her hair gently. Reed came over, bruised and tired. "You did well," he said quietly. "She's safe because of you." Sierra looked at him, her eyes red. "No," she whispered. "She's safe because of us. I just did what I hoped someone would have done for me." Reed nodded slowly. "Then maybe this is how we start to change the galaxy." Sierra looked down at the child, and for the first time, she didn't feel like a slave. She felt like something else, something stronger. A protector, a fighter, a survivor who had become someone's hope. Asterisk rain slammed against the ship's windows as it landed on a hidden planet called Varin 3. The atmosphere was thick with dark clouds and constant lightning. It wasn't a welcoming place, but it was far from the slave routes. A safe spot, at least for now. Sierra stood at the edge of the window, watching the sky boil with stormlight. Behind her, the little alien girl, Milla, played with a soft cloth doll. Reed had made it from leftover fabric and old wires. It wasn't pretty, but Milla loved it. Sierra smiled faintly at the sound of her laughter. But inside her heart, the storm was worse than the one outside. Every time she looked at Milla, she remembered herself. Small, scared, begging for help, and hearing only laughter in return. That night, when Milla fell asleep in the bunk, Sierra sat alone in the hallway, hugging her knees to her chest. The bracelet Reed gave her still hung on her wrist, cold and smooth. But tonight, it felt heavier than usual. She didn't hear Reed approach. He sat beside her quietly, not saying a word. For a while, only the sound of the storm filled the space between them. "Something's bothering you," he said gently. Sierra nodded, unable to speak at first. Finally, her voice came out, cracked and slow. "I thought saving her would fix something in me, but it didn't." Reed looked down, waiting for her to continue. "I still feel filthy," she whispered, "like they're still touching me, even now. I can't stop hearing their voices in my head." Reed's hands clenched into fists. "Then let's shout louder than them," he said. "Let's drown those voices with your truth." Sierra shook her head. "My truth is that I was used, over and over. How do I unsee that?" He leaned back, looking at the ceiling. "I don't think we forget pain, but I think we decide what we do with it. Does it bury us, or do we build from it?" She looked at him, searching for lies, for pity, but she saw neither. Only understanding, only truth. "I want to build," she whispered, "but I don't know how." He nodded slowly. "Then, I'll teach you." Just like you taught Mila to smile again, the storm outside roared louder, lightning flashing like fire through the sky. Suddenly, the ship jolted, lights flickering. Reed stood up quickly. Rushing to the cockpit, Ciro followed close. Behind, on the screen, a message blinked in red. Detected incoming vessel, pirates. She asked, breath catching in her throat. Reed cursed under his breath. They followed us. They want Mila back. Ciro turned pale, her hands trembling. They'll take her. And maybe take me too. Reed grabbed his gear and tossed a weapon to Ciro. "Not without a fight," he said firmly. She stared at the weapon in her hands, shiny, cold, unfamiliar. "I've never." "You don't have to fire it," he said. "Just protect her." Ciro nodded, rushing to Mila's bunk. The girl woke with wide eyes, clinging to her like a shadow. "What's happening?" she asked softly. Ciro hugged her tight. "Bad people are coming, but we won't let them take you." The ship shook again, this time harder. Shots fired outside, energy blasts, lighting up the storm. Reed manned the turret, returning fire. His voice echoed through the coms. 2 ships, armed. "But I disabled one engine." Ciro stayed near Mila, heart pounding. The door creaked as one of the pirates boarded, a tall figure with metal arms and glowing red eyes. He raised a blaster, but Ciro stood between him and the child, shaking. "Move," the pirate growled. Ciro gritted her teeth, lifting the weapon. "No," she said. "You'll have to go through me," he smirked, aiming directly at her. But just as he fired, a loud bang echoed, and the pirate collapsed. Reed stood behind him, smoke rising from his rifle. Ciro gasped for air, still standing. Mila sobbed into her side. Reed rushed over, checking them both. "You're okay," he said softly. "You're okay?" Ciro fell to her knees, shaking, not from fear, but from the weight lifting off her back. She had stood her ground. She had protected someone. She wasn't weak anymore. Later that night, when the storm began to fade, Ciro sat beside Mila, holding her hand. The little girl had fallen asleep again, safe and warm. Reed sat across the room. Watching them both, "You didn't fire," he said quietly, "but you were brave enough to stand." Ciro looked at him, tired but proud. "I'm not who I was anymore," she said. "I'm something else now." Reed smiled. "Yes," he said, "you're becoming free." The sky above Varan 3 had cleared. The storm that once raged across the mountains was now a memory. Soft blue light shone through the clouds, touching the ground with peace. Inside the ship, things had changed too, but not just in silence, or safe to something deeper had shifted. Ciro stood by the window, watching Mila draw shapes on the glass with her little finger. The child hummed softly, her face no longer filled with fear. She was smiling now, a real smile, the kind Sarah once thought she would never see again, not on herself, and not on anyone like her. Reed entered the room, holding a cup of hot broth. He handed it to Ciro, who accepted it with a nod. "She's sleeping better," he said, looking toward Mila. "Because she feels safe." Ciro took a sip and replied, "Because she has something I didn't have. She has someone who stayed." Red looked at her eyes, gentle. "You stayed too," he said. "You could have left any time after we rescued you, but you didn't." Ciro looked down at her bracelet. Still on her wrist, the silver band had become a part of her now. Not a reminder of who she lost, but of who she had become. "I stayed," she said softly, "because I had nowhere else to go. But now, I stay because I want to." Reed smiled, the kind of smile that came from deep understanding. "And that," he said, "is freedom." Later that day, Reed received a private message from a trusted contact. It was a call for help, another transport. Carrying trafficked aliens had crashed near the red dunes of Relax. No survivors were confirmed, but several escape pods had launched before impact. The message was clear: someone might be alive and scared and alone. Reed showed the message to Sarah. "We don't have to go," he said. "I know this isn't easy for you." Sarah shook her head before he could finish. "No," she said. "We do have to go. No one came for me, but we can be the ones who show up for someone else." They prepped the ship for launch. Mila sat in the co-pilot seat, buckled and curious. She looked up at Sarah. "Are we going to help more people like me?" Sarah smiled, brushing her hair gently. "Yes, little one," she whispered. "Because now we know what it feels like to be found." The ship lifted off into the sky, leaving the storm planet behind. As stars stretched across the view, Sarah sat quietly in the main cabin. She pulled out her datapad and opened the file she'd been writing. It was her story, not the story of chains and collars, but of small steps, hard choices, and silent bravery. She had written pages about her past, about Mila, about Reed, but today, she typed something new at the end. "My name is Sarah. I was broken, shamed, and forgotten. But now I protect others the way I needed protection. I was once a slave, but now I give hope." She saved the file and closed the pad outside. The stars burned like tiny promises in the dark. Hours later, they reached the edge of Relax. The sand glowed red beneath the light of the moons. Their scanners picked up faint life signs. Reed landed near a cracked escape pod. Sarah moved first, her boots pressing into the warm sand. She followed the signal toward a rocky hill. There, half buried under debris, was a young boy barely 12 years old, unconscious but breathing. She called for Reed, and together they lifted the boy gently as they brought him aboard. Sarah watched his face. He reminded her of Mila, small, scared, but still alive. Later, when the boy awoke, he looked around in panic. Sarah leaned over him, her voice calm and gentle. "You're safe," she said. "You're not property, not here." The boy blinked at her, confused. "Who are you?" he asked. Sarah smiled. "Someone who is just like you," she said. "But someone showed me kindness, and I'm here to do the same." He stared at her, tears filling his eyes. And just like that, hope passed from one soul to another, quietly, gently, without needing to shout. Days later, the ship continued its journey. It carried not just people, but healing. A quiet mission to bring safety where others only brought pain. In a galaxy full of cruelty, Sarah had become something rare. She had become a light. Not because she had never been in darkness, but because she had found a way out and left the door open behind her. And when others asked her how she survived, how she became strong again, she always gave the same answer. "A human gave me a second chance, and I chose to become someone else's first."